Today we're breaking down fiat money versus Bitcoin, why money slowly loses value. Welcome to Bitcoin Bytes HQ, simple Bitcoin explainers. This is educational content only, not financial advice. Let's go. This topic matters because money shapes more than prices. It shapes saving, planning, and how people think about the future. When money works well, it quietly coordinates long-term behavior. When it doesn't, people feel pressure to spend, borrow, or speculate just to stay in place. Understanding why requires looking at how modern fiat money actually operates. Fiat money is money because a government declares it to be money. Dollars, euros, and yen aren't backed by gold or a physical commodity. Their value comes from laws, policy decisions, and trust that the system will continue to function. That trust can be strained or abused. Governments can expand the money supply or adjust policy in ways that benefit themselves or certain groups, often at the expense of everyday savers. Think of fiat money like tickets to a large public event. The tickets work because everyone agrees they grant access. But the organizer can issue more tickets, change seating rules, or alter access conditions. Even if your ticket is still valid, its real value can quietly decline. Inflation shows up in prices. Debasement is the underlying cause. If inflation averages about 3% per year, it doesn't feel dramatic, but it compounds. Saving $10,000 at 3% inflation means that after 10 years, it only buys what about $7,400 used to buy. Debasement increases the money supply faster than the economy grows. Inflation is the rising water. Debasement is the faucet feeding it. Debasement affects behavior. When money loses value over time, people spend now rather than save. Planning for decades becomes risky. Imagine a ruler that slowly shrinks. Would you measure carefully or rush to use it before it gets smaller? Even subtle debasement shapes behavior across generations. Modern examples show this happening quietly. After the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020, governments injected trillions in stimulus and expanded the money supply through quantitative easing. $10,000 in early 2020 could buy what about $9,000 buys by 2023, with roughly 10% cumulative inflation. Japan experienced mild inflation for decades, showing that even low rates gradually reduce long-term planning power. Small, persistent increases compound in ways people often overlook. Governments create and expand money to fund spending, pay debts, or respond to economic shocks. While these actions may appear necessary, the incentives don't always align with individual savers. Money creation can benefit borrowers, debtors, and the state, while slowly eroding the purchasing power of anyone holding cash. Money also functions as information. It signals scarcity and value. Fiat money can distort those signals. Think of it like a thermometer that always reads a few degrees higher than reality. Your decisions are based on a skewed signal. Bitcoin preserves the measurement. Its supply is fixed, so it conveys scarcity more accurately over time. A major shift occurred in 1971 when the United States ended the direct link between the dollar and gold. From that point on, money creation had no fixed constraint. This added flexibility in crises, but also made steady debasement possible. Over decades, small increases compound into structural changes that quietly reduce purchasing power. Bitcoin was created in response. It has a fixed supply, 21 million Bitcoin. That number cannot be adjusted. Think of Bitcoin like a measuring stick carved in stone or a house with fixed walls. You can plan around it because the size doesn't change. Unlike fiat, Bitcoin removes discretion from money creation. The rules apply equally at all times. With that foundation in place, let's look at where people often get this wrong. A common misunderstanding is that inflation mainly comes from greedy companies or temporary shortages. Those can affect prices short-term, but sustained inflation comes from monetary expansion. If prices double over about 25 years, that works out to roughly 3% per year, quietly eroding purchasing power. Another misconception is that a little inflation is necessary. Many believe it encourages spending, growth, or stability. But real growth comes from productivity and innovation, not simply printing more money. Expanding the supply to mimic growth hides real gains. It's like building a faster car but inflating the speedometer. You feel like you're not getting anywhere, even though progress is happening underneath. Fiat systems distort behavior. Debasement creates incentives to borrow and spend rather than save. A borrower paying 4% interest while inflation runs at 3% is barely paying anything in real terms. Meanwhile, a saver watching $10,000 slowly lose value over decades is penalized. Over time, people take more risks, shorten investment horizons, and plan less far into the future. When the ruler keeps shrinking, long-distance planning stops making sense. Technology should act as a deflationary force. Computers, storage, logistics, energy efficiency, medicine, and communication all get cheaper as innovation compounds. If productivity improves by even 2% per year, costs should fall meaningfully over time. Over 20 years, something costing $100 could reasonably fall closer to $60. Instead, many prices stayed flat or rose. Monetary expansion absorbed the gains. Inflation also builds slowly. In countries like Argentina, Turkey, and Venezuela, prices rose gradually for years before daily life became visibly harder. Savings lost value, long-term planning collapsed, and people were forced to spend or borrow. Even when economies produced enough goods, currency expansion alone eroded wealth and behavior. Some people say fiat money is backed, while Bitcoin is backed by nothing. In reality, fiat relies on policy, enforcement, and trust in discretion. Bitcoin relies on rules and scarcity. One system can expand under pressure, the other cannot. Bitcoin doesn't promise prosperity, but it preserves purchasing power over time. Fiat is like sand slipping through your fingers. Bitcoin is like storing it in a sealed, transparent container. What you see is what you get, and it cannot be secretly diluted. Beyond saving, Bitcoin can also be used for fast, low-cost payments through technologies like the Lightning Network, showing it isn't just about holding, but about optionality and independence. When I first studied money, I thought inflation was temporary and necessary. I assumed it would correct itself and support growth. That belief made me ignore long-term math. At 3% annual inflation, money loses roughly half its purchasing power in about 24 years. Time does the work quietly. Bitcoin changed my mental model by separating growth from debasement and treating monetary integrity as a rule, not a policy choice. To recap, fiat money prioritizes flexibility, but that flexibility comes at a cost. Debasement is the faucet, inflation is the water rising. Technology should make life cheaper, but monetary expansion hides the effect. Borrowers gain, savers lose, and productivity signals are blurred. Bitcoin fixes the measuring stick and seals the container. Planning, patience, and long-term coordination become meaningful again. Observe prices, wages, and productivity over decades. Ask what changed underneath. A simple next step is to compare today's prices and salaries to the past and notice how the measuring stick moved. That's fiat money versus Bitcoin, why money slowly loses value, simplified. If this helped, like, share, and subscribe for more Bitcoin explainers. Drop your biggest takeaway in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. See you in the next one. Thanks.